thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Why I Love Flagler County, your local podcast spotlighting local businesses and local residents on what they love to do to be a part of Flagler County and then also our neighbor Volusia County, because we have a lot of overlap. So I'm super excited to have my guest with me, Miss Joan, with us today. Joan, thank you so much for the time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me on and allowing me to share some of the things I do.
Of course. Well, Jen and I were talking. We were introduced by a mutual friend in Marissa Wilcox, who she was on the podcast not too long ago. And then I got to know Jen through a quick phone call, and I really loved everything she shared on how she helps seniors, what puts her apart, makes her different as a real estate agent. And there's just so much that she does that helps the community that really touched my heart. So I'll let her talk a little bit about that. But to just kick us off and get us started, and I'd love to know your journey coming here to, Volusia, coming down to this area of Florida. What brought you here and how's that journey been for you?
Okay, so my husband's job was relocated. We're from the Northeast area up by the tri-state, Pennsylvania, New Jersey. And we came here in 1998 and we moved to Central Florida, Seminole County, and raised our children there. And we always wanted a beach house. So in 2013, we purchased a beach house and brought us here over to the beach side. And for a little bit, we worked back and forth. I've had my real estate license since 2014. At the next year, I was actually inspired by the lady who sold us the house in here over here on the beach side. So we've been here, and we absolutely there's no greater place than Flagler, Volusia County. It's
Yeah. It's really be
paradise.
Yeah, it is, and, Ormond is really just kind of like the next stop over from us here in Palm Coast in the Flagler area, and I think Ormond has a lot of the same qualities that Flagler has when it comes to what people love about it. It's a small-knit community, there's a lot of things next door, and then, your beaches are as well just as quiet as I think ours are.
Yeah.
It's not like Daytona is, it's a little bit quieter, a little bit more secluded. I'm sure you guys don't have to worry as much about parking, I hope, like we don't out here in Flagler.
No, it's
Eh,
there's little kind of beach areas to park your cars and
Perfect.
go to the beach and restroom areas. So
Yeah, it's
yeah.
a little, like you mentioned, a little paradise.
Mhm.
So I know you said a little bit about how you were inspired to go into real estate. So I'd love for you to talk what did inspire you and what really pushed you to take that leap when it comes to real estate.
I had probably three customers that they were older than 55. And one woman, I would literally meet her in a shopping center, and we would for the paperwork because she didn't do computers. And I realized at that time that there is a niche of people. They are very hesitant to put a mortgage application on the computer. So I have actually taken people's paperwork, have them seal it up in an envelope, and I will get it to the mortgage lender in order for them to have the proper paperwork. Um, the next couple that truly, truly inspired me to go get my designations and my certification, I would sit with them at their kitchen table and go through the contracts page by page. And that old adage, when you give a little, you get so much back in return. My personally, I believe people older than us have so much wisdom. They have so many things to share. So that has been, I just am encouraged and enjoy having their knowledge, their wisdom. And one thing in particular, a gentleman, I had arrived, I had my paperwork, and he came in with this big um, bushel of peaches. And he said, and his wife said, yep, as soon as you leave, they were gonna, is it called shuck? They were gonna shuck the stones out of the peaches. And then she opened the cabinet, she still canned like tomatoes and, you know, so it just honestly warmed my heart. It was, so I was very inspired and saw that there was a need for that, for sitting face to face and not most of my customers don't do electronic signature. They will if they have a child, like if they have a older, person
Mhm.
within a radius of them that can show them how to electronically sign. But mostly we do hand delivered paperwork. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
will. I really, really love that, and I loved the part where you mentioned that, people older than us, they have so much wisdom. I know most people are older than me anyway, but I think it's really important for
Right.
me at my age, to always keep my ear out. I feel like people are always saying things and
Mhm.
they don't realize that it's wisdom, they just start talking about maybe their journey or their life or something that they've done, and it just kind of frames something a little different in myself, like, oh, this is what inspired them. This is why they're doing that. How can I use this to kind of apply to my life? But also, I grew up with my grandma. I lived with her full time from ages, when I was born to 18 when she passed. And she didn't even speak English, and she spoke Cantonese, which is a dialect of Chinese. And I didn't even know that language really, but there are different ways that we were able to communicate, and I was able to learn so much from her, and
Mhm.
her experiences coming to America, which is just an insane story. And I feel so privileged that I was able to learn that story, and learn of the resilience and strength that it took for her to bring her kids here to America. And it was not easy. It's not easy now. It wasn't easy in the 80s, I think is when it was. And
Right,
it's
right.
just
Mhm.
so lovely. And I feel so honored anytime someone gives me their story because there's just so much in there that you would never know if you weren't looking to pay attention. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You have
Yep.
to be open to that.
Right.
So yeah, so you mentioned a little bit on what you do with seniors and with people who need that extra help in person, which is, I feel like, I mean, it's a little hypocritical that I'm doing these over Zoom, but I love human connection. I meet a lot
Mhm.
of people that I do these Zooms with in person first, and that really helps me learn about them before I do this. Um, so what kind of puts you a little bit different, as a real estate agent? I know you touched kind of briefly on that. What are some of the other services that you provide as a real estate agent so people can start thinking, oh, this is maybe why I should reach out to Joan?
One of the things, there's a couple of things. One of the things is I have accumulated vetted professionals
Mm.
that have the same mindset that I have. They have the patience to work with a senior. They know that they're going to have to sit face to face. And, it's not always, it could be that they're going to meet with the children, or especially if there's like the onset of dementia or Alzheimer's, in which case, one of the biggest things is, um, to use an example, would be a moving company. If a moving company is not well versed in working with a senior, I have companies out there that will replicate, for instance, a person's bedroom. And when someone has the onset of Alzheimer's or dementia, they need to have that room replicated the same as it was at home. So the movers will go and put the bed, the end tables, the sitting chair exactly where it was in the person's home. Additionally, we may use, like you mentioned, Marissa, who connected us. We would use a company like that to come and stay with the older person while the movie company is there,
Wow.
because you really don't want to have, the dining room set being taken out of the house, while the, person who's owned that dining room set for years, it's very traumatic.
True.
So I make sure that all of those boxes are checked, and I provide that added stress from people. They don't have to go out and look for somebody who is going to be able to work well with their parent. Um, because I just feel it's very important to have the correct people, especially when you're going through a move. And the biggest thing that is important to me, when somebody calls me and they tell me, we got to sell mom's house, my first question is, where is mom going? And
Mm-hmm.
that I have people that they are placement specialists. So they are very versed at every independent, assisted, and memory care community up and down the East Coast. And they're my go-to people. and they'll be able to tell the folks like who takes private pay, who accepts Medicare. And first and foremost, you need to know where, even if somebody's just moving to a 55 and older community, I help them find where they're going to go before we even put their house on the market. Because there's nothing worse than, yes, you have a buyer for your house, but then you are, well, where am I going? And the biggest issue is financially. Everybody's not suited to go to financially ready to go to an independent, even if they're very coherent, they just financially can't afford um, an
Mhm.
independent living.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No,
so I tap into my resources for that.
that's so sweet. I really, I've said this a few times, and if anyone's listened to a few more of my episodes, then like more than one episode, I say this all the time, but I love highlighting this that so many businesses that I've talked to, pretty much all of them, they always have a process to put the customer first, to put the client first. It's really their main desire, it's their goal, it's what they really get out of it. And I just love hearing that that is a really big part of what you provide because I think when you have that mentality, when you have that mindset of, I just want to make sure this person is taken care of to the best of my abilities. And if I can't do it to the best of my abilities, who else can come in and help to the best of their abilities as well? Like you mentioned with the movers and with someone like
Mhm,
Marissa. So I think that's really, really cool. I had never thought of that, I guess, because also that's not my field.
mhm,
But I love hearing these things that's so new. And I'm like, this helps me be more creative. Like, how can I help people in my own way? And
mhm,
who else can I know and who else can I add to my network and tap into connections when things like these pop up?
mhm.
So that's super cool. I didn't know that.
Okay.
You also mentioned to me before we started recording that you help out with the senior center and there's a few things that you do there. I would love for you to talk a little bit about what it is that you do.
I host a monthly seminar for seniors, and I invite my vetted professionals to come and speak. The month of February, I host them at the Ormond Beach Library, um, and it's the third Thursday of the month at 11 a.m. This month, I had an estate planner, um,
Wow.
that's one of the top things in what I do because however that home is deeded is very important because sometimes it's left to like four children. So there's a lot of moving parts. The title company has to get in touch with the four children, and everybody's got to be on board to sell that property.
Mm,
So
sure.
having an estate planner or an elder care attorney is one of my top um, folks that I utilize. So I had a woman in, her name is Wendy Mara. She's in Ormond Beach. And now coming up in March, I have, her name is Chanel Benham. She talks about Medicare. And the thing that I love about her, she'll come and she'll speak, but she is not um pushy, like, you have to sign today
Right.
or you're not going to get this special deal. She, like me, is an educator. Our primary goal is to educate folks and not have them feel threatened by the sales calls that they get or the
Sure.
TV commercials, call today, this 800 number. My goal is to introduce the senior community to as many professionals that have an interest in not selling them like the Brooklyn Bridge, you know? So
Sure.
that's my March speaker, and she's going to be awesome. In April, I have a speaker. She does the placement.
Hmm.
She places the folks, but she has an excellent, excellent video presentation, PowerPoint on
Hmm.
dementia and Alzheimer's. So
Wow.
yeah, so you can go to my website and check out stay on top of who I'm going to have each month.
Yeah, I'll
Um,
make sure I have all that information in the description so people can click on that just a little easier
okay.
and check that out. So maybe they can attend or maybe someone they know might be able to benefit from that because those are all really important topics.
Mhm,
I know I'm I've worked with a few estate planners in the past. I've been in networking groups with them and they've talked at length about different things that they help people with. And I know that there are just so many things that we as the community, we as people need to know
mhm.
about what our options are for ourselves and for our families and friends. And it's always good to have that education, like you mentioned. It's
Yeah.
It's
And if I
really
can add one other
of
thing,
course.
you're never, ever too young to set up your, that's what this attorney spoke about. Even if you think you don't own a home, you should still put in place like your power of attorney in the event
Mhm.
that, just say you got into a car accident and you were not, capable of paying your bills, you put someone in place to get into your bank account and that type of thing.
Oh,
And
yeah.
one, if I may mention for
Mhm.
any senior that's going to listen to this podcast, because the attorney mentioned this at my last series seminar, never put don't put your sister or your child's name on your checking account or on your bank account. The way to do it is to do a power of attorney. So in the event that you are incapacitated, they could utilize your account. How you do not put their name on the account, because if anybody ever sued that person, like if I put my child on my bank
Mm,
account and someone sued my child, they can go after my bank account because their name is on there, which makes total
yeah.
sense, but nobody ever thinks about that. So I
Yeah,
hope you
that's
don't mind that
funny.
I shared that,
Yeah, of
because to
course.
me, that is like really good. Because most people think I'll just put my son Johnny on the check, on my checking account, and he can go to the bank. But if Johnny gets, and a lot of times it's not Johnny's fault. It's just
Right.
that somebody's going after Johnny financially, and then they take the mom's money, which is, I hope you don't mind me mentioning that, but
Yeah, no,
that
I
could
think
be a
that's
little
really
podcast
important. Yeah,
takeaway.
it's a very it's a tip that I guess I never really thought of, but I know I can't think of another word, the power of attorney.
Right.
When I
Important.
turned 18, it was like the first thing my parents did. It's the first thing they signed up for. They were
Oh,
like,
good.
"All right, you're an adult now. If something were to happen, we need to make sure like you mentioned like if you're incapacitated, another part is medical decisions, you know?
Yes.
If you're in a coma, if you can't articulate your thoughts, I mean, I trust my parents more than anything. If something were to happen to me, I know that they would only make the decisions that were being made the most sense to my health,
Right.
and to my, future. So I know that I can't think of another word, the power of attorney, I guess.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
why it's
It's
called the
it's
power. There you go. But, I
good.
think that's a really great tip that people can keep in mind. People always think, no, nothing can happen to me. It'll never happen to me. It'll happen in the future. I can plan for it. But you don't plan for anything like that, you know?
Exactly. It just may creep up on you, and at least you're prepared, because otherwise, if the government and gets involved, and it's really gets sticky. So,
Yeah,
to have to try to get into someone's it, and it can be very expensive.
sure.
You have
Yeah.
to actually, if you don't do that and you can't get into your child's account,
Mhm.
say, you have to go to the court and do a guardianship. You have to,
Mm,
and that's, she
yeah,
said it's very, very expensive to do that.
it
So,
is.
yeah,
Yeah. No,
yeah.
there's
So I hope that helps some
yeah,
people out
I
there
think
listening
so.
today.
I hope so too. Yeah,
Good.
it's really important. I mean, I know from so many personal experiences with people I know that it's my dad's something my dad always taught me is, you always have to think of is what is the worst case scenario and am I prepared for it? Can I handle it? And that's really where a lot of my decision making comes from. If something like this, if I find education, it's like, okay, now I know what estate planning is. What is the worst that could happen to me specifically or my family? Are we prepared for that? Can I handle
Right.
that? Things like that. So that's the kind of mode of decision making that I follow with my dad taught me. But Joan, I really appreciated you coming on the podcast and sharing so much about how you help and service the community, especially a group of people that I think a lot of other people are ready to write off in a sense. And they want other people to conform to maybe the way that they do it, but you go out of your way to make sure that you can make these clients feel as comfortable as possible, speaking the language that they speak and reading it in the way that they need it to be read. Is there anything that I missed that we didn't get a chance to touch on yet? I know you do a lot of great things, so I want to make sure that everything gets a chance to shine.
Um, I think you covered so much, and I'm I'm always available for folks if they have questions and things like that. I'm always happy to help, or point them in a direction. And I was going to say that once work with someone, and I had a gentleman real quickly in Palm Coast. I sold his house, and he
Okay.
went into an independent community. And about, I don't know, 3 months went by, and he called me up and he said, "I'm not really happy here." I said, "Okay." And he was thinking about going to a manufactured home community.
Sure.
But I don't really sell those. But I made an appointment for him, and we all went together. I went with him, and he had a lady friend that came along with him. And he asked me, he said, "You don't really sell these. Why do you do this?" And I said, "Because once you're my customer, I will always be there for you I'm not going to say, well, I'll try to help or reach out to my connections to help to make
Yeah.
sure that, because ultimately the goal is to make that person, if they're not happy, they have to find out where it is they're
Yeah.
going to be, that they're going to be happy.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I'm really glad to hear that. It kind of goes back to what I was saying. It's how can I as a person help my client or someone I just have a connection with to the best of my abilities. And if it's not my abilities, who else can I bring in to the best of
Mhm.
their abilities, like you mentioned with your connection. So
Right.
I really love that you brought that story up. I think that's
I,
really important to know.
I want to mention too that although, I reside in Ormond Beach, one of my favorite places to go is Flagler, because you can go to a coffee shop and everybody feels like they're your neighbor. It
Yeah.
is the most friendly place I think that I've ever been.
Wow.
And that to me is important, when you
Yeah.
sit down, and their restaurants are phenomenal.
Hmm.
So, but just the tight knit community of, they may not know you, but they still recognize that you're there.
Right.
That to me that's an important quality.
Oh,
So
wow. Well, I'm
Flagler's
glad
all
that
about
you
that.
brought oh, that's so sweet. I'm so glad you brought that up because I think that's really special to hear from someone who doesn't live in Flagler, that that's how you feel when you come up here. So I'm really glad. Come up here as often as
Oh,
possible. We'll
thanks.
have to do something. But
Thank you.
Joan, thank you so much for coming on and sharing a
It
few
was
minutes of your time. I really,
thank
really enjoyed this conversation. It was really fun for me to learn. And also, I think every story that you shared really touched my heart. So I'm really glad that we had this time together.
Thank you so much, Macy. It was a pleasure. My pleasure.
Course. Yeah, well,
All right.
thank you so much to all my listeners as well. I really appreciate you, and I will see you next time.
All right. Sounds
Bye.
good. Have a wonderful week.